Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
I don't spit.
It's the mosh pit.
This way to the mosh pit.
When the music starts, they really jump.
This is really quite awesome. This is really great. I identify with several of these people.
We all adore Buddha. Before Nana speaks, we usually go around and say our names, and I believe we're all householders. Are there any monks in the room? No? So, when you say your name, also let us know who else is in your household in terms of not just partners and family, but pets and whoever else might be in your household. What are you?
Sentient and unsentient beings would
Yeah.
be fine.
So my name is Bob, and I have one roommate, but I also have 3 children in Berkeley where I stay at least once or twice a week.
And their ages are?
2, 6, and 6.
Oh my God.
And that was a busy year.
It was. Do you want to go next time?
I'm Diana, and I live with my partner Nancy and 4 dogs, and a cat and 2 parrots. And I think actually a field mouse or 2 that the cat hasn't eliminated.
My name is Mark, and I'm actually living right now. It's nice and quiet. I grew up in a big family.
My name is Patrick, and I live alone because my apartment is so small there's no room for anyone else.
I'm Snake, and I have 2 partners.
Sorry. And I live with 2 plants. I'm Marty. I live with like 1,500 CDs and about 1,000 vinyl albums and 500 cassettes. I'm looking for a roommate. I have a great room for rent.
I'm George. I'm the only other human in the house, but there are many other sentient beings other than Earth.
We'll leave it at that.
Yes.
I'm Kay, and I'm living with my partner Chuck, and we have 4 plants and 2 spiders living like that.
I'm Carl, and I live with Ginger and Sarah, my 2 Siamese cats who are 15 years old.
I'm Carl, and I live with my partner, Jim. We did have a mouse in the house, but we had to get rid of him.
It was a sad moment, I'm sure.
It was worse for the mouse.
Yeah.
It was traumatic. My name is Jim, and there are a variety of spiders and a few ghosts, and we're close to our landlord who owns the place and lives upstairs.
Oh,
Carl. Slugs, too. And slugs.
Oh, slugs.
My name is Brad. I live with my partner, Ken.
My name is Howard. I live with my landlady, Gudrun, native from Denmark, and a cat we share named Suni.
My name is Lee, and I live with my partner Steve, and Tweed and Joscan, who are cats. Tweed takes after Steve, and Joscan takes after me.
Mm-hmm.
But our relationship with them is platonic because they've both been emasculated.
Important details, Max. Thank you for sharing.
fostering 3 5-week-old kittens from the Oakland Animal Shelter, and they're the cutest little things with their tails straight up. So I'm mixing up lots of kitten soup, formula, and wet food for them.
Great fun.
My name's Paul, and I have a dog, Bodhisattva, Bodhi for short, and I live in a very nice apartment building that I tried to make as much of an extended family of people who are willing to participate.
Great.
My name is Paul, and I live with a cat, and I live in an apartment building where all my neighbors are unintentionally part of my family. Noise.
My name is Jim. I live alone. I have 3 keyboards and a lot of books. And I'm trying to become a gardener. And I'm having a war with the blackberry thorny vines. Won't go away.
I'm Jack. Aurelia and I live in the 8th. He says there are spirits in our place, but they're never there. I scare them away.
My name is Quentin, and I live alone.
My name is Brooke, and I'm visiting from Eugene, Oregon. And even though I live right downtown, I live on the edge of a wooded park, so I get to see all sorts of birds. That's kind of awesome. Another thing, I'll probably be very rude and be like newspaper and stuff.
I'm Peter, and I live with my partner, Rod, who works at the Oakland SPCA. So you know what happens now. They have Henry the dog, Bo the cat, Roscoe the cat. And downstairs is a tenant, Juliet, who's going to law school. And she has a dog. And then there's assorted spiders.
What is it about spiders? There are a lot of spiders here. I love spiders. Scare me. There are very few things in life that scare me, but spiders are it. That and little things that fly, like bug type things, just give me the creeps. I don't know. I like snakes, and I like, kind of traditionally scary things, but little tiny stuff. If a mouse ran in here, I'd be on this chair standing and screaming like this. I don't know how that could be. How many people, most of you look very familiar to me. I know that I've met most of you before. Who's never heard me speak before, ever? I know you haven't, because I haven't ever been to Eugene. Okay, anybody else? Hello. Here, why don't I pass these out, and please take one, and if there are enough and you want to, please feel free. And let me just give you a little background about Nichiren Buddhism. Nichiren Buddhism was, Nichiren Daishonin was a monk who practiced in 13th century Japan, and I read a lot of books about him, written by sociologists and various religious people who don't practice Buddhism, and it's interesting what they say about him, that he was militaristic, that he was trying to install his version of Buddhism on the state of Japan as a sort of political thing, and that he was weird and ugly. These are kind of like things that, wow, that could describe most of us. But anyway, the thing about Nichiren was that he really, at the time in Japan, there was an enormous amount of government persecution of ordinary people. And he was extremely fond of ordinary people. And in fact, his whole focus was on finding ways to encourage, to cajole, to get people of ordinary stature to think about what Buddhism meant to them. And it created, he didn't create, actually, I shouldn't say he created practice. He discovered or became enlightened to, shall we say, a practice that he promoted to everybody he knew. And for this, he was resoundingly persecuted because he created a means for people not to need a priest, for people not to need the government, And this is really, I mean, if you read about the original historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, this is exactly what he was doing, 2,000 years before Nichiren Daishonin, which was to say, you don't need somebody as an intermediary between your enlightenment and the great beyond, whatever. So the practice that we have, the primary practice, is chanting Myoho Renge Kyo with the honorific Nam, or some people chant Namu, but the organization that I am a member of, we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And Myoho Renge Kyo is technically and simply the title of the Lotus Sutra in Japanese, Old Japanese. And this form of Buddhism takes as its focus the primary text, the doctrine, if you will, the Lotus Sutra, which was one of the last sutras that is said to have been expounded by the original Buddha, Shakyamuni. And so our meditation, if you will call it, is an active kind of thing because we're chanting rhythmically as much as we can Nam-myoho Renge Kyo to activate within us the Buddha nature that exists in everything. That is a very brief explanation, and we can talk about a little bit more about that. What I have here, this packet of information, which we're not going to read through, as we never do, but it's for you to go home and take if you'd like. What I want to share with you today is a concept called Ichinen Sanzen. And Ichinen Sanzen means 3,000 realms in a single life moment. And I'll explain what we believe that to mean and why this is so central to Nichiren Buddhism. In this packet, the first piece is something that Nichiren Daishonin wrote, a translation, called The Essence of the Lifespan Chapter. And he's talking about the lifespan chapter being the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra, where it talks about this concept of 3,000 realms. There's a couple of experiences from some gay youth that I know that are really wonderful, and they're kind of about this concept, although they don't use the term Ichinen Sanzen. This one by Danny Hall. There's an article that's more in detail. It kind of gives a background of what is this principle of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life or single life moment, none of which I'm going to read from. And then let's see, and then there's one more experience by Corey James, who's really great. And then the last concept, changing ourselves changes the world around us. And this is really what this principle is to get at. As a kind of an aside, I've gone back to school. I've been specially or something, I don't know what the term is, accepted as a special student at CIIS, California Institute of Integral Studies, in a PhD program in Buddhism. And the reason I wanted to do this was because I feel real good about knowing about Nichiren Buddhism, and I know some about other forms of Buddhism, and I want to be a more understanding and articulate when I speak with people, because I don't want to come across like an idiot, which is something that's very important to me, is not to appear stupid. So, in going to class, I'm learning so much about I'm really trying to find a way to explain to people what are the distinguishing features of Nichiren Buddhism that are different, and why I find this practice suits me so particularly well. And this concept of Ichinen Sanzen is really about, it gets at a lot of kind of Buddhist concepts that are pretty much transcend most forms of Buddhism that you'll hear. For example, everybody knows that the Four Noble Truths about life is suffering, and then there's cause to it, and there's a way out of it, and there's a path to it. These concepts are really cut across all forms of Buddhism, but what is the path that allows you to somehow eradicate suffering or change suffering, or whatever your word is, whatever verb you want to use about suffering. Some people want to escape suffering. And so what is this path? And I think that the Nichiren tradition for me has been very instructive in how to see the relationship between what we perceive as reality and the suffering that's inherent in it, and somehow using it to manifest the greater part of ourselves. one of the things about this concept is that there's a sort of theoretical teaching about it, the concept of Ichiren Sanzen, which I'm not going to talk about because I'm not a theoretician and you can read about it in here. But basically, the 3,000 realms means that every moment in life, there are the possibilities for 3,000 different things to be happening, is the way it's been put. And this was not original to Nichiren Daishonin. It was actually a Tiantai teaching, or Tendai teaching if you prefer. But Nichiren picked it up and used Nam-myoho Renge Kyo as a way to activate this principle of Ichiren Sanzen in one's life. Each moment that we live can manifest the past, the present, or the future. It can manifest 10 worlds, which are from hell at the lowest level to Buddhahood at the most upper, and they're mutually possessive. In other words, you can be in Buddhahood and feel in hell, that they're not mutually exclusive. So the fact that they're mutually possessed by one another means that in hell there can be Buddhahood and Buddhahood can be hell, so you multiply 10 times 10, and then there are 10 factors which get at the 10 factors of life. For example, each moment can be a latent effect of something or a manifest effect of something. There are this whole creation of possibilities is really what it's trying to get at. And this means that at any single moment in life, the possibility for changing the past, the present, and the future are endless. And what causes one to be able to change this is what we can, Ichinen, we always talk about in Nichiren Buddhism, my Ichinen is to do something, my determination at this moment is to make something happen. And the thing that was so profound about Nichiren was his undying belief in the ability and the potential of human beings, no matter how flawed they were. That they didn't need to achieve a level of some great sage or thinker, or they had studied a number of austerities, but rather from this very moment you could activate this incredible, basically you can activate the entire universe. And because you can activate this entire universe somehow, you can change it. Human beings have enormous power to change everything. These are really, really incredible, incredible concepts that for a long time I didn't understand how the hell is I supposed to do this? It seemed like, I'm supposed to activate, the past, present, the future, I don't even know, There's a great article which isn't in your packet, but Burton Watson is I don't know if he is or past tense was a translator of a lot of Buddhist teachings. Specifically, he's very well known for translations of the Lotus Sutra, and he wrote an article called The Lotus Sutra in the 21st Century, and this was in our Buddhist magazine called Living Buddhism. And he says, basically, one doesn't even need to wait for the process of rebirth in order to move from one level of development, if you will, from the 10 worlds, from hell, hunger, animalities, all the way up to Bodhisattva Buddhahood. That you could activate any one of those at any moment. That it wasn't a procession that you had to work through. That it was actually it was immediate. It's a sudden realization or sudden enlightenment. There are various schools of thought which I don't understand entirely, but the idea that your enlightenment can be either sudden or gradual, or not at all for some people, and that this principle of Ichinen Sanzen really is about activating enlightenment instantaneously without effort. And what I mean by without effort is you don't have to practice X number of years of austerities and achieve some level of have some level of achievement in your Buddhist practice in order to awaken something within you that is instantaneous. According to this doctrine, all of Ichinen Sanzen, all the 10 levels of existence are potentially possible to an individual at any moment, regardless of the level that individual occupies at the time, and hence through good deeds, understanding, and faith, or through the lack of these. One may move up or down the ladder within the span of a single lifetime. We oftentimes talk about people who have a negative relationship to this law of the universe, that you can become enlightened through not believing. which I think is really, because you have a belief, means you activate that law. I don't know, it's a negative relationship to what one would think, that you need to have this, right thought, right action, right livelihood, all this stuff. But in actuality, you can have a negative perspective and still get at the same place. This is because every moment has the potential for all these different realms. You're already activating this principle, and therefore your enlightenment, according to Nichiren Daishonin, is guaranteed. There's one other, given that we have this incredible tool to us in this concept of Ichen and Sanzen, that we feel in the practice of Nichiren Buddhism, we activate it by chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. What is it that we are trying to accomplish, I think? I think that this, for me, and thinking about this for this discussion today, is really this concept of changing reality. What we call reality isn't necessarily really reality. It might be a habituated thinking or feeling about a particular topic, or all signs point to this as a bad thing, when in fact it may not be a bad thing. That we have the power to decide, in essence, what the meaning of any given moment will have in our life, whether it's a positive influence or a negative influence. Which isn't to say that, if you grew up and had, say, sexual abuse in your family that wasn't a negative thing, I think we'd all agree with that. But what you do with that information, what cause you make from that information, is what determines whether it has a positive or negative influence in your life. And I wanted to say that this idea of changing reality by changing an inner determination, or it's not just, I think I'll be happy today. I determine, it's like a really strong conviction that I am going to see an outcome that I want to have in my life. When in our Buddhist magazine, this is our September 2003, there's a series called The World of Nichiren Daishonin's Writings, which is taken up by 3 or 4 of the prime people in the study department, if you will, in Japan, which is the originator of this Buddhism, came from Japan, and there's a large organization internationally that's based in Japan. And the title of this is talking about a struggle of wisdom and courage to change reality. The idea of struggling to change reality and having the courage to change reality, I think, is fundamental to us, what we're trying to do in overcoming our own suffering. Having the courage to change something is, I think, there's a lot of emphasis on individual effort, individual courage, determination in order to make something, to change what we call poison into medicine. And there was a really great couple of quotes in here that says, people in general tend to view Buddhism, sort of broad Buddhism, as a philosophy of self-reflection that teaches inner peace, and even as a religion that advocates escaping reality. In fact, I parenthetically had a teacher tell me in a Hindu class saying that escaping reality was a good thing that Buddhism taught, which I didn't think that was really what the Buddhist was trying to say, but it's fascinating. In many cases, to simply explain that Buddhism is a powerful teaching for changing reality is to completely alter people's understanding of it. Basically, it says that faith is the source of strength that enables us to directly confront painful difficulties. The important thing is to keep challenging ourselves again and again, to keep advancing, to continue moving forward is essential. And through this concept, there is a belief in our practice that there is no difference between, therefore, the state of Buddhahood and our effort to attain it. That they're one and the same. Our efforts, our desire to awaken to something greater than whatever our suffering may be at this moment is itself Buddhahood. That this awakening that, wow, there is something in my life that needs to be changed, and I'm determined to change it, is itself Buddhahood. Because most people suffer, what was it Thoreau said, the mass of men lead their lives in quiet desperation. It's true that most people never get to this idea that they should ever change. And this is the purpose of Buddhism, all forms of Buddhism was to change the suffering into something not suffering, or to transform it into something better, or to transform it into something far beyond our wildest expectations. I wanted to give an example of this concept, and then we'll open it up to questions. My partner and I have been magnets for lawsuits, which the first one seemed like an aberration, and then the second, third, and fourth, and fifth seemed like karma. And they came out of the blue, and they're from people who I sold a car to a wholesaler down in L.A. because my car blew up on the freeway, and he bought it as scrap, and he turned around a year and a half later and sued us, saying that we sold him a car that was salvaged. It's like, that's his business. So, okay. The most difficult one, the longest running thing has been my partner and I hired a contractor who had done some work for us, and then we hired him to do another phase of work for us on the renovation of our home. And he did a horrible job, and the third time around, the first two times of little stuff was not bad, it was foundation work, and then he did some structural work, and the structural work was, oh my God, he hired people off of Army Street. I mean, this was really bad. And, he tore down walls he wasn't supposed to, and, he ripped up the floor, and he did all this stuff. Anyway, didn't follow any of the plans, and we fired him, said, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. 2 days later, he put a lien on our house, and 3 days after that, he sued us for something like pain and suffering, all this money that we supposedly owed him. It was actually not that much money. It was only $6,500. But he wants his day before a jury. This guy's nuts. $6,500. If it was $5,000, you'd do it in small claims, and he'd probably lose. So he has dragged this on. We had to hire a lawyer, and this horrible, horrible thing, and he refuses to settle. And we spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to represent ourselves against this guy who's wacko. And he represents himself in court, and the judges therefore give him a lot of leeway. And it's just insane the things that he says, that we intentionally tried to rip him off. It was fraudulent on our part. We had plans to hire him to do all this work and then not pay him, which wasn't true. We hired him to do the work, and he screwed it up, and we fired him after we had paid him. So he decides that he's going to continue this on. And so volumes of paper go through the courts and all these hearings and stuff, and I feel like I'm going insane because my attorney isn't my friend. And they're just like, oh, money, more money for us, go to court. I chanted and chanted and chanted and chanted and chanted and chanted about this because the suffering that I felt was so intense. It continues to be intense. The suffering was about, I must have done something to deserve this. Or why is this person who doesn't even know me trying to destroy me? Why is he saying all this stuff about me that's not true? And, I could certainly say, well, it's a benefit because I realize where my weaknesses are and how I feel about myself and how easily my opinions of myself are changed by what other people do. Those were good things. But I couldn't figure out how the hell am I supposed to get out of this? Because there wasn't, apparently, we offered to settle and he refused. He says, no, I want my day in court and I'm going to go after you. This is crazy. And a jury trial. This is stupid. Well, I am a very good strategizer in my life, but sometimes there are, in these sort of karmic kinds of things that come up, there's no Diana Elrod strategy that will work. And I hate that fact because I think my strategies are really fabulous. And there was not a single strategy that I could come up with that would work for me. So I sat in front of my altar and chanted to the scroll mandala that we have in our altar called a Gohonzon. And I chanted and I said, you know what? I just don't have any answers anymore, but I am determined to change this. I am determined to change this. I am determined to change this. And I kept thinking, I have no idea how, but I am just going to make myself available to whatever will change in my life or out there. Maybe I'll win the lottery, whatever, I don't care. I don't care what it takes. And I had this incredible experience while I was chanting, and this is really this kind of, it's not effortless. It's effortless in the sense that it's not something that you do, but something rather that comes out of you when you activate your Buddha nature. And that was this belief that that actually I could pay my lawyers all the money that I needed to pay them and pay him whatever he was asking, and still determined that what I did was not settle with or give money to an abuser, a rip-off artist, a scam artist. I could determine that actually I was going to give it to his Buddha nature. Now this was really weird because it just came out of me. It was like, I'm going to give this money, whatever money is going to come from me, I'm not going to lay down. I'm going to give it to his Buddha nature, and he's not going to see it in. He can see it however he wants, but I can just make this determination that I will get inside him somehow. And all of a sudden, I thought, well, that's really kind of interesting, and I felt this kind of heavy weight lifted and everything. Like 20 minutes later, the phone rang. This woman who also had been sued by him, he sues everyone, by the way. Afterwards, I'll tell you his name so you never have to deal with him. He sues everybody that he works for. And this woman out of the blue calls me and said, we just had a case and went to trial, and I just wanted to let you know that he lost, and he lost big, and I would like to give you our strategy. I had no idea that this was going to happen. And I thought, wow, that's really great. Wow, that's really great. I feel really encouraged. And then the next day I get a phone call from my lawyer saying that based on this experience he had where he lost and he lost big, he's decided to settle with us. And I thought, wow, this is really incredible. I won't have to go through a jury trial with him, and I'll only have to pay $6,500. And it turns out that somebody else has already leaned whatever we would win or whatever he would win. So it's not actually going to go to him anyway. It's going to go to somebody else who got a judgment against him for $200,000 15 years ago. And, none of these things had occurred to me would happen. And yet, because I determined that the reality of it was I was not going to give it to him, whatever it was whatever money I ended up having to cough up, I was not going to give it to him, but I was going to determine that I was giving it as an offering to the Buddha. Even though on the surface everybody in the universe would say, you gave him money, I decided that's what wasn't going to be the case. It became, the reality changed. And all these other things just started changing, and there's a settlement agreement, and he's withdrawing all this stuff, and we're going to pay him money, and we're going to be done with it. And you know what? I'm the happiest person ever to be able to say, I've created something that I thought I was never going to be able to create. And I realized that I changed it because of my determination. I wasn't able to see how it was going to change, but I just making that thought that this moment has to be different. What I'm going to do right now has to be different than the one I did last time. I don't know what that means. On the front of this, there is, in this black box here, it says, a change in our determination first produces a change in the inner reaches of our life. It enables us to manifest qualities of excellent health, abundant strength, and boundless wisdom. A life that has been transformed in this way will lead others in the direction of happiness and be committed to vanquishing evil. And that, to me, really sums up what our practice is trying to do, is this fundamental idea of changing reality, changing the suffering into something else, and not because we just, because we've made peace with it. I didn't make peace with this at all, but I determined that it was going to have to change, even if I didn't have the answer. So, with that, we have a few minutes left. I'd love to open it up to questions or comments. Yes?
I know that Christians have a liberation theology. I think it's predominantly South American or Latin American, where the church is very active in social issues with the idea of change in the way you described. And I wonder, now what you would talk about, Diana, I'm assuming it isn't just your own experience, but there's a movement within the Buddhist Islam that you work in to incorporate change when it's really seen as necessary.
Right.
Is it, so within those circles, is there an equivalent like of a Buddhist liberation theology, where is it, like for instance, like in this country, but all over the world, you can certainly find lots of examples in this country where change is needed on a grand scale. And I'm wondering whether there's efforts within the Buddhist communities you're familiar with to take this determination for change and incorporate the social issues.
On an individual level, yes. On a kind of a movement within the organization, no, with one exception, and that is to our international president, my personal mentor, President Ikeda, Daisaku Ikeda, he writes a peace proposal every year on January something, 26th, I think, and submits it to the UN. We're involved with activities, ancillary activities, primarily as an NGO through the UN. But in terms of the kind of liberation theology that you're speaking of, no. And the reason is because we believe that change always must come individually, and that our movement is a movement of personal transformation, and when people are personally transformed, then they make choices to change the society. It's indirect. We've always had and I think that's what really Nichiren Daishonin was doing, although he did oftentimes go and paper the government with these writings about how the world was going to hell in a handbasket unless the government got off its can. But that was 13th century Japan. And I think there's some history, there's certainly a strong history of a more mass movement in Japan, because the relationship between church and state, or religion and state, is very different than it is here in the United States. I really think that, though, the focus is always going to be on me and my own community here, with the determination that whatever I do here will change out there. And it won't be necessarily obvious and direct, but I know in my heart, because I understand that by changing here changes everything else. That I don't have to go out there and go knocking on doors. So I will, introduce this practice to somebody, or we have a lot of meetings, gay and lesbian meetings throughout the United States. We have a national conference for GLBT people. I come and talk to you guys. It's all the same to me. It's not, it doesn't require a political action on my part, because once people are awakened, people make, we believe, the correct choice politically too, whatever that means, whatever's the best for the people. I hope that answers your question. Snake.
Does anyone ever say, the problem with the world is there's a lot of big egos that want to control everything, and the answer to this is acceptance.
Well,
how does that fit in?
There is ego uncontrolled, and then there's ego that's full of wisdom. And a life that is transformed through consistent faith and practice and study will be, you're training your ego to be useful. I have a very big ego, but I am learning how to train it and use it in ways that are important and meaningful to whatever it is that I'm doing. An untrained ego is, it's presidential candidates and stuff. So in our belief, the ego is actually a very powerful tool when trained. I mean, I can think of a whole bunch of musicians, internationally known musicians. For example, Herbie Hancock is a member of the Soka Gakkai. He's he's very soft-spoken, and he's very polite, and he's very sincere. I've talked with him before, but he has a really big ego. And he says, I work hard at keeping it from being all about me. I have to recognize it's not all about me. Me is a vehicle for something better. Me is a vehicle for helping other people overcome their suffering. That, to me, is the employment of ego to good. Others? Yes?
When you were chanting and trying to, and resolving to let a shift happen, do you believe it was your intention or your surrender?
It's intention. We don't have a concept of surrender.
You did give up the illusion that you knew what to do.
Correct. But the intention to change it was what was, that was the determination. That was, to me, this intentionality in Nichiren Buddhism is extremely important. And I think that's in a way true for, a lot of traditions when you're talking about right action, right speech. What is that anyway? And intention is what's behind whatever that right action, right speech is. And so there was an element, I guess, of surrender, but it wasn't to me it wasn't the most salient aspect of what happened. I gave up the ego part of my control and said, okay, Buddha nature, come out of me. I'm chanting to pull out the deepest wisdom I have in my life to make this change. And it's not a wisdom like It's the wisdom to know what forms you fill out at the bank, or it's the wisdom to know, how to deal with the government. It's a life wisdom is very different than sort of book learning wisdom, or, and it's like not really controllable. It's bizarre. It's like having somebody channel something. It's a very strange feeling. And it doesn't really happen a lot for me. Sometimes actually the most extreme suffering I have felt sometimes in while chanting life was the happiest. It was the weirdest experience. Having something come out of my life that was so positive and wonderful and beautiful that I could say I am the most miserable person in the world and yet I am the most happy. To have those both at the same time, I think, is really fundamental to Nichiren Buddhism, that one is not exclusive to the other. Others? Questions? Yes?
I get this sense that that change is determined by me, and that feels interesting to me. It feels like Homo sapien centric, that the whole world really revolves around the human species, and I see it bigger than that. That change is unfolding with me or without me. There's a movement in creation that I, through spirituality and trying to awaken to, participate in. One of my questions is, do you think the changes that you experienced as you kind of reframed your legal circumstance happened precisely because of your determination, or was going to happen in spite of your determination?
No, I think it happened because of my determination. I think that it happened in spite of my mental, intellectual strategy. I think that it happened, and it isn't. When I say I'm activating something that's within me, I don't believe that I really. What I'm trying to say is that I'm activating a universal life force that's existent in everything. The difference, I think, in why human beings are so important in this endeavor is they're the only ones that can make conscious causes. To see that, Nichiren Daishonin writes extensively about the only difference between a Buddha and a common mortal is that the Buddha is awakened to the fact that he is. He's a common mortal who's awakened to that fact. I believe that a dog has a potential for Buddhahood too, but it is not going to be particularly accessible because of their current circumstances. And I do believe that there's a lot of change that happens whether we want it to or not, but there are a lot of things that we could actually manifest differently that would mean something to our own lives, that would eliminate our own suffering, that a lot of people just don't avail themselves of. James Joyce is a great writer for his epiphanies. He writes a lot with these moments when a character has this aha moment. And the world looks different for that person after that aha moment. And there's one, and I can't remember the name of it. It's from the Dubliners, which is a short story in which this woman, she's sitting in a window and she's looking out the street. And the way James Joyce describes it is, all these things are happening, and you get the feeling that she's depressed. He never says this woman is depressed. He just describes the cars are gray and it's raining and the wind is blowing tattered curtains, and you get the sense this woman is really depressed. And then later in the story, she has some sort of an awakening, and all of a sudden, the wind blowing through the tattered curtains is like the breath of a baby in its mother's hair. It's like that's what I mean by changing reality. It's changing a perception of what something means, and I think that really does get at. I think that is fundamental to human beings and not maybe other life forms that I'm unaware of. So, I don't know if that explains it. I see what your point is, and I understand it very much. And it does come across pretty damn arrogant to me.
To be a changing perception is a real valid articulation of your experience. I'm doing some studies of indigenous spiritualities, and had a friend who ran over a snake, roadkill. And he very deeply connected to earth spirituality and the power animals and the multiple realms of sentient beings. And he was devastated. And the teacher said to him that in Native spiritualities of the indigenous peoples, they believe that the snake intentionally put himself in the way of the car, sacrificed its life in order to provide a moment of awakening for the driver. And from their perspective, the greater intelligence or the greater wisdom came from the snake, not the human being.
That's really interesting.
And I found that just, that completely opened my mind from a tendency for me to be Homo sapien centric. This whole earth revolves around me. And in one sense, from that perspective, I'm grateful for things like earthquakes.
Right.
That really wake me up to a bigger reality, or windstorms, or those kinds of events. But I appreciate the gift of being able to shapeshift our experience and understanding of reality, so that in it we see enlightenment.
And I think that human beings have an enormous force for destructiveness, more than an earthquake, to me personally. I mean, and I think that what we as human beings do is so vital to whether or not that changes. An earthquake is nothing compared to a war. And the power the struggle between within all of us, the opposing forces of good and evil, is a constant battle. And I think that me going negative on everything, me thinking negative, me deciding that this sucks and I hate him, and is part of that process of constant worrying. So when I change my outlook that I can see the Buddha nature in another person, I've changed the future of whether or not somebody else has a war. I mean, I believe that. And in the same way that I believe that a butterfly flapping its wings on this side of the earth can change the weather on that side of the earth. I just don't think that, we are very narrow-viewed. As you're saying, we have a very narrow view. I think that we're not centric enough, Homo sapien-centric enough in certain areas, and too Homo sapien-centric in others. So, maybe one more question? Anybody? Yes.
Well, since somebody else has raised their hand, I'll hog the floor for a second question. I hear about, talking about just putting some intentionality out in a very focused, fierce way almost, to create change, and that change come about. And I believe that. But it's also kind of scary, because you think, well, then, there are other people who are putting this energy out in a focused way to it, and what they're trying to bring about might not be the greatest thing. But they think that, I'll give an example. I read somewhere that there are a number of fundamentalist Christians who are focusing in intense prayer that certain Supreme Court justices will die prematurely, so that push this Stockholm with these more ultra-conservative justices and get these decisions more to their liking. And I'm thinking, and that really disturbs me when I hear that, because I think there probably is some power in focused intention. I just want to know if you can comment on that.
I struggle a lot with the idea that the power for evil is stronger than the power for good, and I don't think that's really true.
See, people would say that they're not evil. They say that they have an idea of good that would come about by stopping Supreme Court or ultra-right wing. I mean, they don't see themselves doing an evil thing. And
right.
It's just kind of scary to see that people, under the auspices of doing something good, are really fiercely focusing on something that for me would be an evil thing.
To me, though, that gets at an issue that is very important in all forms of Buddhism, really is a kind of slander of someone else's Buddha nature. And I think that when you have power coupled with a disregard for somebody else's Buddha nature, which is ultimately, I think, a lot of these kinds of negative intentions are, regardless of the politics. I can think of, I can think of a lot of liberals that could do the same thing in a certain kind of way. Ultimately, those actions, I think, that are from what I understand Nichiren was trying to say, is those actions that are not based on deep reverence for human life, for the respect for an individual's Buddha nature, are ultimately powerless against the kind of intention that comes from a deep reverence for other people. And it may on the surface and at the moment look really destructive, but ultimately when the cause for good, when combined with a lot of people, in my case, chanting for good, will have a power, I think, that is probably a lot stronger than this negative. I think people acquiesce to negativity a lot because it's scary. People don't, I never hear somebody saying they acquiesce to the positive. I certainly don't. And what is there to acquiesce to? It seems pretty lame sometimes, you know? It's like, I'm so sarcastic, you know? I'm very cynical. I've always been very cynical. I still am cynical, even though I chant. But I see it in myself as a negative function, as some sort of a function to pull me and everybody else around me down. I can tell a really good joke, and then sometimes I regret it later. But again, the intention for good is so, I mean, in Buddhism, in all forms of Buddhism, is incredibly powerful but not often seen, manifest. It's an incredible cause. Negative things seem to be manifest like that, whereas positive things oftentimes don't. Because they're subtle, they're more broad-based, they reach a lot of different people in different ways, and it causes awakenings in people. So I don't know if that answers the question for you, but in my mind, it just proves to me that the need for what I do and what all of you do in your own practice of trying to change our own lives is something I can't stop. And I think that's a good thing.
I'm sorry. I see a focus and intentionality on that side. Mm-hmm. Also, I play with a lot of ignorance, whether I'm right or not. I don't see on the side that I support. I see a lot of dispersion and confusion on my side. I see a real focus and intensity on the side that wants to bring about changes that I think are ultimately destructive, maybe even evil changes. Mm-hmm. And it scares me because I think there's power in that focus and intensity, and I don't think we have that accountable power on our side. Mm-hmm.
I understand that. Yeah, it's a real and the idea of not me personally becoming very turned off by the whole experience or afraid of it. I don't want to shy away then from what it is that I'm doing because I think that it has no effect. I think that individual efforts have a lot more effect than people give credit for, but when they see faced with an army of people who seem well organized, they give up. And I don't think Buddhism definitely, I mean, regardless of what branch of Buddhism or, practice you, in Vipassana, whatever, Zen, it's all basically the same in the sense that it's a practice that's ultimately intended to liberate people from this kind of ignorance. And it's just needs to be awakened even further. It just makes me want to go out and talk to people more about Buddhistic values, if you will. So, how are we doing, timekeeper? Are we done?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all so very much for having me again. Good to see you. If I said something that you didn't understand or want more explanation on, you can either email me or call me. I'm happy to. Whatever.
Let's have announcements.
Marty, where's Marty? Here. Oh, yeah. Marty has kindly and graciously offered his beautiful, spacious apartment for our GBF Thanksgiving potluck. And so, traditionally, the potlucks have been a lot of fun. It's a really great sense of community and sharing. So, unfortunately, I only have a limited number of flyers. The company broke down because it's a whole lot. But if the flyers are available, if you really are interested in going, if you're not interested in going, please don't take the flyers available. So, that'll be out there.
Okay.
And I'm the host this morning, and again, we have a Nana Ball out there. Please give consistent donations, $5. If you can give more, please do so. If you can't, just give whatever you can. And also, feel free to use cups, but if you use cups, please rinse them
to lead us in the offering
Let's
of
do Nam-myoho Renge Kyo together 3 times, shall we? Come on, stand up. Come on. So we're going to do Nam-myoho Renge Kyo 3 times. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.